Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. Guys, before we get into the big topic of today, which is the ACC versus Florida State, which everyone kind of counted out the ACC at this point, that there would have to be a mutual agreement. But there's one attorney right now who's worked with other attorneys in the North Carolina area that says, well, we have another side of this that we've seen, and we think the ACC is in a great spot. But before we go into that, guys, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Guys, a great place, big organization here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A great place to get anything you need, especially for your parties, your tailgates. They're great. And it's more importantly, run by Pitt men. Give them a look, give them a call. Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Again, guys, and before we get into the video, subscribe to the channel as more and more ACC realignment conversations are coming out. We're dropping more, and the source we have today can potentially, an attorney, can come on to the show potentially in the near future as we reached out. We're working on dates right now to get them on here, but wanted to share this with you as it's a big, massive complications that we've had in terms of the ACC and the Florida State battle within the lawsuits that are going on right now, but it's a very good point in a tweet that was put out recently here today. But here, before we get into it here, I'll share my screen here. A very interesting note. I'm going to read it here to you guys and give you my thoughts on top of that as well. As you guys can see here, as it starts to load. Let's see here. Once it pops up here. There it is. Again, David McKenzie, an attorney out of the Raleigh, North Carolina area. Right now, the ACC and Florida State are working right now to see who really holds home court. The Florida State Seminoles are trying to find a way to have this in a Florida court. Obviously, the ACC continues to deliver blows to that in terms of how that could possibly happen. As of right now, it looks to be a stretch. But David McKenzie, who's not involved in the lawsuit, who's an attorney looking at both sides, wanting to see who is really going to win this case, is really sided with the ACC the entire time. And here, David McKenzie, again, out of McKenzie Law, the first thing he decides here on this massive tweet he had here, ACC settlement stance with FSU. It's unlikely. And again, we've heard a lot about this week potentially, oh, well, there's going to be a settlement between the ACC and FSU. The case is clear on outside sources. But when you look at the attorneys who are coming out right now saying the ACC is in a great spot, here's why David McKenzie's bringing this up. Every ACC move is now scrutinized for hidden meetings and recent conjectures, including from Andy Staples and M. Baker. I mean, it's Matt Baker of the Tampa Bay Times, about ACC potentially signaling a settlement with Florida State are prime examples. Instead, it is more likely the ACC has no intention to settle with FSU, especially at this stage. You never settle for a discount, especially early on in a case like this. You never settle at a discount when a liability is clear and you have a solvent defendant. This is a doubly true early on. I have only written about how lousy FSU's case is and how strong the ACC's case is here. And he has a link here. If you ever want to see that, I'll put it at the bottom of the description for you guys to get even more depth to read there. There is nothing to decode. The ACC was just stating facts. Substantially, the ACC briefs in support of its motion to dismiss. It's 43 pages long and contains over 7,500 words. It is in dense and legal arguments, but just 2 sentences have sparked the speculation that the ACC may be interested in settling now. If Florida State wishes to regain control of the rights before the end of the term, it could attempt to repurchase them. But having to buy back at a right which was assigned is not a penalty. It is simply commercial possibility. This is not a language of a conciliation. It is the reiteration of a fact. It's akin to reminding someone who has sold you their house that they can always enter the market to try and buy back the house. Not that you are eager to sell, willing to sell, or inviting an offer. Another headline here, it would be poor strategy to settle now. In terms of a strategy, the ACC settling now would be like folding with a royal flush. As I have argued at length, the ACC's position is extremely strong given the copyright and contract law principles that will resolve this case. In addition to asserting no meaningful contract defenses, Florida State also has a massive SOL problem. The notion that the ACC would offer an olive branch by settling for anything less would claims full value. It's just not improbable. It's strategically unsound. And again, a massive SOL, they have an issue with paying. Florida State is not in the position right now to hand over $450, $500 million. I believe Florida State valued it at $500 million to leave the ACC right now, which puts them in a major issue if that was to come up. If they were to leave, they would certainly be in a lot of debt. It would actually sink the university to a point where it would struggle mightily, along with the costs and all the liabilities they currently have on their balance sheet at this point. That is something that is massive in terms of what Florida State is dealing with as they try to go to court to find a way through this. But right now, their case just does not look strong. And more importantly, they're spending millions of dollars that really is not going to land them in a certain case that David's really going to point here. They could be really in a big jam. And what could the ACC potentially do when their case is this strong? But as he continues to go on, there are times when settling early makes sense, despite having a strong hand. The unpredictability of a trial, curtailing attorney fees, and avoiding reputational harm come to mind. But as I have argued elsewhere, the ACC FSU Doling lawsuits have dismissal or early summary judgment written all over them. With FSU solvency not in question, the ACC has no reason to stop now. I think that is just massive. And obviously, as you can see here, the Florida State University Board of Trustees versus defendant, the Atlantic Coast Conference. Motion 2, or alternatively to stay. And obviously, you'll see in the comments here, Matt Baker a little bit walking back from the Tampa Bay Times, saying he didn't think there was a settlement of sorts, but recent tweets that he brought out said he was pretty clear that a settlement could come down the road. But obviously, he's walking that back a little bit. But it's pretty clear, guys. One of the things that is well known from David to what he's talking about there is the case for the ACC is extremely strong. And we talked about this over and over again. The Tampa Bay Times and Florida State fans at this point were just pretty much sure, you know what, there's no way. That just more and more evidence that says, well, they're going to settle. I've been saying for how long now, the likelihood that the ACC would settle with Florida State, who has till technically on the books, even though it's only an option for ESPN till 2027, or really 2026, on the books, if you go the full extension, it's till 2036, and that's what they're logged into. FSU's trying to make a case that said they were defrauded and they didn't know this and they didn't know what was going on. They handed over their rights by signing this. And I've mentioned that this is why many of attorneys, not just from FSU, but also from the other teams in the conferences, the other universities, have also said this is ironclad. When you look at this, the possibilities of getting out of it were thin as they were. But now as you go into it and you look at both sides of the argument, the legality issues that FSU has just really turned on themselves is very noticeable. And, and David writes there, who's a well-established attorney, has had over 20 plus years of experience, a guy that's well known. And again, we're working to get on our show to go into more depth about it, has really just gone into more depth about it to say, hey, the ACC is in a heck of a position in terms of just being able to have an upper hand. And people were talking about, and the one thing that I had a major issue with, it didn't make any sense, was, well, they're definitely just going to sell. They're going to settle to work their way out. No, I don't think so. The ACC, in terms of what David was talking about, was, hey, it's just a stating fact. If you want to leave the conference, you'd have to buy back all the rights that are there, along with going forward, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the case of $500 million. So it's been something that's been ongoing. We learn more and more each week to, the more of the secrets that come out. Obviously, potentially, Florida State could be looking at a felony charge for displaying and releasing certain issues within the grant of rights. Obviously, with ESPN, that's part of a clause. You're not allowed to release that type of stuff. Obviously, that puts Florida State into a real bind. But I think what you're seeing now behind the scenes is the question that I brought up recently a couple of weeks ago is, ESPN, for instance, are they going to really, in terms of the option, are they going to exercise the option, what's going forward? That's number one. But number two, you look at the other teams in the ACC and the universities, they're really just watching this at this point and watching this unfold. And, people have asked me, why, JJ, why haven't more teams jumped involved? Why aren't more universities jumping on board with Florida State to create more of a momentum to leave the ACC? Well, from people that I've talked to, just from other universities and people that I know from contacts from other teams in the ACC, they're stuck in terms of, hey, this is clearly ironclad. And let's just say we eventually work a negotiation to, let's say magically that we can get a some type of settlement that comes out of this, where you're looking at potentially still 250, 300, 350 million dollars. Universities do not have that type of cash on hand. The amount of debt that you would go into on terms of, that's great. Go into a new conference, you're making more money, but also too, you're still worried about the other costs that you still have at the university. Obviously, let's for instance say, the SEC, from any intents and purposes, from anybody that I've talked to, is that the SEC does not want anything to do with Florida State because they do not bring a pro rata. They already have that market with the University of Florida that's in there. So pro rata would not work, which means they would get a full share. Full pro rata is a full share into the SEC. The same thing goes into other conferences. ACCs are the same way. But SEC does not really see a fit with the Florida State, because of the Florida Gators already really occupying pretty much all of the Florida area for the SEC. But what gets it even more is that the focal point is either going to be, for Florida State, is easily going to be the independent route or the Big Ten, which everything kind of points to the direction of, the Big Ten would be interested. I think the Florida State needs to work on getting its AAU status. That's a really big thing. If you look at the rest of the Big Ten, I think the only one that doesn't have the AAU status anymore is Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check that if you guys will let me know in the comments, but it's a tough route. That's kind of what they're going to at this point. Florida State really wants to join the Big Ten, but I think what goes involved with that is, one, they can't join anywhere near right now because they will not get a full share. It's kind of like what happened with Oregon and Washington at this point. Oregon and Washington moved on from the Pac-12, along with Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA, but they're not getting full shares. They're not part of full shares with that. I think Oregon and Washington are only getting a 30 to 35% share, which will cover, the majority of their costs in terms of being able to travel, things of that nature. But it's not enough. They'll still lose money in the meantime, but it's enough to get them to 2030 when the renegotiation happens. And when that happens, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC will get a full share of the pro rata that goes into it. So they'll be fine. But when you look at it, Florida State, you're down in Florida. I mean, everybody's up north. I mean, the traveling that's involved, you're going to the West Coast plus the northern part of the country. I mean, that is constant traveling, not just on your football team. It's one game a week. You're going there for a couple days. One game a week, especially when you're on the road, maybe 6 road games a year, maybe 7 road games a year. That's it. But then you're looking at the other sports that depend on that money. Basketball, the non-revenue sports. There's a lot of costs. There's a lot of things that go behind the scenes, and that money's crucial. So when you're only getting a 30 to 35% stake, you're going to be in a real jam for the next 5 years, and you need a lot of donor money. Which, I mean, at Florida State, one of the things that got Jimbo Fisher to leave was he called Florida State cheap. They refused to do facility upgrades. They refused to invest in the program, invest into the biggest brand they have, which is football. So Florida State's trying to work that way in. That's why they're also trying to get private equity firms involved. But obviously, when you're on that, you're basically saying, from a private equity standpoint, that college football's here and you think it can go to here. But a lot of people are saying college football's here. It may have that little wiggle room, but that might drop down depending upon if teams leave, if they break away from the NCAA. That could be a massive cost and loss, massive loss to what could really hurt Florida State even more, can pummel a university, obviously across the United States. Just on average, the enrollment of each university has gone down, which has been a 5-year span, 5 years in a row. That's something that makes teams, and especially universities, very nervous. That's why a lot of teams and universities are looking for state funding, working with Congress to try to get that stuff passed. Everything of all that goes into sorts. So to be in this battle right now, truly, really only hurts Florida State. The ACC is in a great position from what David's saying and from what he's talking about. A guy that's a veteran with 20-plus years. You got to see both sides of it, that he's right. I mean, there's a really tough stance for Florida State to try to win this thing. That's why they're trying to get it in Florida to get the home field advantage, to try to help out a little bit. But it looks like it's going to be in North Carolina, and they're going to get smashed with this. And the millions of dollars that Florida State is losing right now is critical. So, guys, again, if you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. Let's get more of a conversation in the comment section. I love answering the questions, but more importantly, your thoughts. What did I miss? Do you see Florida State leaving before 2026? Do you see them leaving before then? Also, do you think Florida State has the upper hand, or does the ACC have the upper hand? You guys let me know in the comment section. Let's get after it. Again, always subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, but more importantly, always and forever, hail to Pitt. Guys, until next time,